Okay, we're just up on 2 o'clock now, so 2 o'clock Eastern time. I know some of you are dialing in from overseas as well, so welcome. Thank you for joining us today on, and it's, I guess, yeah, it's East Coast time. I live in Atlanta, so we're presenting from Eastern Standard Time. And we're going to talk today about SQL Server 2012, high availability and disaster recovery. And I know that there were some link audio issues the last time that I presented. So if you guys run into any problems or you experience any delays or something, if you could just let me know in the chat window, and I'll do my best. I'm unfortunately emceeing by myself today, so I won't have someone to help me sort of adjust, but we'll do our best. And what I did from the Always On session from a couple of days ago, I actually re-recorded that session and posted it up on YouTube. If you guys are interested in the link, just send me an email. I did notify everybody on that webcast that I had posted that link to YouTube. So, and what I'll do is I've created a channel, a new channel, and I'll be posting all of these sessions up to YouTube. So you should be able to see, everything that we've done so far from this, training program perspective. So looks like, I don't know if I've got the wrong slide title here. I actually launched the wrong slide presentation. Yeah, it looks like I've got the wrong slide presentation. Just bear with me here for a second. Let me get this, the correct version of this launched. There it is, BI Government. And let's do a quick slideshow from the beginning. Okay, here we go. Okay, so business intelligence and analytics in government. And we're going to focus specifically today at basically so I'm looking at the chat window here as I go. And I'm seeing, are all of you okay? Can all of you hear me okay? Just one final check here before I get started. Okay, great, thanks. All right, so we're going to be talking about Tabular BI and specifically some of the new tools that Microsoft has to address some of the self-service BI components that more and more people are talking about today. And we're going to go through Excel and SharePoint and also SQL Server, obviously, and we're actually going to build a tabular BI model, and we're going to relate some tables together using PowerPivot, and then bring that all through to a demo where we're actually creating some reports using Power View. So just to introduce myself for those of you who haven't been on any of my calls before, my name is Jeff King, and I'm a SQL and business intelligence platform architect at Microsoft. And essentially, I'm a pre-sales engineer working with our SQL Server team. I spent a lot of time talking to customers about SQL Server, also a lot about SharePoint and business intelligence in general. We do a lot of troubleshooting for customers, sort of figuring out some of their issues, and also a lot of research around problems. We've obviously got a lot of connections internally to great resources. So, we work very closely with customers and also provide training opportunities like this. So, I have over 10 years of experience working in SQL Server and business intelligence, and I was a consultant prior to coming to Microsoft. So, I haven't just read the books. I've actually been there, developed on the ground. I stood up one of the largest SharePoint BI deployments in the world at the Department of Veterans Affairs in the United States. We had massive deployment there, and I've worked in several different areas. So I've got fairly comprehensive background in terms of what I bring to the table from a troubleshooting and just business acumen standpoint. So feel free to ask questions as we go along here. And I know you're muted, so if you want to go ahead and use the link chat window to do that, please go ahead. So just to focus on the actual program that we've launched. So what I've done is over the last couple of months, I've been working with customers and figured out that there's a pretty strong need for some training and just general how-tos. And these events, this isn't a formalized training session where you're sitting at a desk with a set of books in front of you. This is more about inspiring you. So showing you what the tools actually can do, and then you can take that and sort of say, okay, well, let's go and see what we can build inside of our organization using the same skill sets. And we will walk through a whole demo process, so you'll be able to see it from start to finish. But the gov.sql training program is basically an opt-in program. If you're on this call, I will be emailing you again at some point. If you don't want to be included in future emails, just let me know and I'll pull you off the list. But we'll be running web-based training events like this, and also we'll be communicating to individuals through email. When we've got new patches, or we've got a brand new version of SQL that's coming out in the future. I'm sure there's going to be some announcements and a few nice things around that in terms of demos and what you can expect. So we'll be sharing that with the group, as well as we'll be talking about real world business problems. So issues that you might send me that you're having with one of your SQL Server environments and that you want solved. And maybe we can turn that into a larger session and show you in real time how to solve those problems. So that's really the design of this gov.sql training program. And if you want to share this with your friends or other people that you're working with, please feel free to send them my email address and just have them ask to join, and I'll make sure that they're on the list moving forward. So let's talk about the agenda today. So today we're going to focus on the evolution of the BI landscape and just BI in general, and obviously with a focus on specifically on tabular BI. So we'll take a look at how things have changed over the last few years. Also, I've been working in the government or at least in the government space, that vertical, for a long time. And I know that there are some challenges. So, we'll talk about some of those today, and I will reference back. The point of this is, as we're going through this, I'd like to talk about what the challenges you might have are inside your organization and what we're doing from a product perspective and a solution perspective to try and address some of those. We'll, of course, review our Microsoft BI platform, and then we'll go through a full demo of our PowerPivot and reporting services. And then what I've done on this slide deck is I've actually included a bunch of SQL and BI resources. And this is sort of a leave behind when I'm actually in front of customers directly. I'll leave them the slides, and it's links to training and a few other components. And I'll make sure that everybody on this call has access to the slide deck after, so that you can come in and reference those links. So let's talk about BI and sort of how it's changed over the last 30 years or 40 years even. Where we got into BI and just before we actually had computers on every single desk. We started off obviously in the 1980s with static reporting, and this is the old dot matrix printers that would print out huge matrix style reports. With really not great graphics. So I mean, that was sort of the starting point. In 1990, we moved to interactive dashboards. So, the late 90s, where Crystal reports and business objects and some of the other players, Cognos, some of the other players in the BI industry sort of came in. And actually, where I got my start in the BI space was I actually was working for Crystal Decisions, which was then acquired by Business Objects, and then I finally jumped over to Microsoft Stack. But it's been around for a while, and the whole concept of interactive dashboards and some of those things. And as the web technologies that support all of these things have changed over the last few years, we've really gotten to a place where it's a very flexible set of technologies now. It's you've got HTML5 driving a lot of this stuff. You're actually working inside the web browser now to build your analytics, and we're going to take a look at how to do that later with one of our tools. But it's really changed a lot, and that's where we get into sort of the today's world. And it's great. We've got all of these underlying tools, and Internet Explorer works with everything, and we can build dashboards and all kinds of different things with reporting tools. But some of the things that are really changing, and some of the things that the industry is moving towards, is really that whole concept of self-service. And when we talk about in memory, now we're talking about downloading millions and millions of rows locally on your laptop or whatever tool you're working with, and storing those in memory, for incredibly fast response times. The ability to build and model locally in your own environment from a data perspective, and then publish that out to the real world. So, these are really some of the trends. Also, the whole mobile application, where we've got people bringing Android devices and iOS devices, and now, Microsoft's got our new Surface, which is a great tool as well, where we've got full apps that support BI. And then, of course, social. So, and this was a big thing when I was working at the Department of Veterans Affairs, is, we had this incredibly large organization that had a very set of diverse BI needs, but there was no way to share solutions across an entire group. And we're talking 400,000 people in the case of the VA. So, these are all really important things when we think about business intelligence. So I just wanted to lay out the standard business intelligence blueprint. And this is what I consider sort of the core building blocks of any business intelligence deployment. And I like to just lay this out because we're really going to start digging into each one of these layers in just a few minutes. But of course, on the front end, or on the back end, I should say, you've got your line of business applications. And these are all of your transactional systems, so your OLTP systems that are feeding data into your business. Whether they're human resources or finance, if you're a healthcare provider, you've got patient healthcare information, lab results, everything that sort of is just tons and tons of data feeding different transactional systems that run your business. And the challenge on the BI side is, how do we get the data out of those systems and make it so that we can report off of it? And that's where we have a nice business integration layer in between, and that can be a combination of BizTalk Server or SQL Server integration services. There's a bunch of different players. I don't like to mention our competitors, but there are a bunch of different tools that we have out there that allow us to get data out of our applications and into our data warehouse. And the data warehouse has come a long way too in the last few years, where we're not just talking about star schema relational data models anymore. We've got a huge play in OLAP now, and then OLAP is actually, and my prediction is that in the next few years you're actually going to see less and less of OLAP. And the reason being is that we're moving towards what we call TOLAP, so tabular OLAP, and MOLAP, which is multidimensional OLAP. And these are sort of new ways to create OLAP cubes. And what's different about these and what makes them unique is that, the end user is able to create this. We no longer need people to come in and write multidimensional expressions, and use analysis services and really know how to pivot and do all of these crazy things inside the application. It's really changing towards, the benefit of the end user. So then, of course, on top of our data warehouse, we have our reporting and analytics tool. And this is where obviously every player in the market, including Microsoft, is making a huge investment. And we're all trying to come out with the perfect set of tools. And, Microsoft, we obviously have reporting services and Performance Point and Power View and Excel. What we're starting to see inside the organization, and when I go to conferences internally and we look at the product roadmap and the direction, is we're starting to see a lot of all of our technologies. So the things that were sort of the standalone, okay, we're going to go out and purchase the technology and bolt it on, all of that's starting to move into our existing product. And what makes it unique is that it's all driven through Excel now. So we're starting to take a look at how do we take our existing off-the-shelf solutions, our Microsoft Office suite, and actually bundle the BI features into that. And where this is fantastic for the end user is that you're not having to go out and buy licenses for secondary products like business objects or Hyperion, or I guess that's Oracle, isn't it? So there's a lot of additional cost associated with setting up a BI environment when you're talking about our competitors. And then, of course, built on top of all of our reporting and analytics, we have our collaboration layer. And our collaboration layer is, of course, SharePoint. Or file share with Microsoft Office sitting on top of it. Of course, we like to promote SharePoint, and I'll show you why in just a few minutes, but as we get into the demo. But essentially, that's how we're taking this and sharing all of our reports across an entire organization. So I'm not going to go through each one of these challenges, but I did want to just put this up here. And I think the thing that we're trying to address right now, and we're also trying to address in this call, is when we talk about what the challenges are faced by government agencies, is training. A lot of these people, or subgroups inside of our organizations, they don't have budget for training. They don't have budget to even deploy a BI solution. A lot of times I'm going into organizations and I talk to, human resources or, some other portion of the business, and find out that they're actually running multiple technology stacks. Like they've got, business objects on one side of the business and then SQL Server running the other side of the business. And you ask the question why, and it ends up being like, well, we had our own departmental budget and we needed to roll out fast, so we brought in some consultants, we bought the software, we're good to go, it gives us what we need. So there isn't this sort of, I guess, ubiquitous solution that sits on top of any organization, it seems like. So, and that's where we get into training and we get into consistency problems with our data quality and systems that aren't talking to each other. So, these are just some of the problems that are faced by government agencies. And, what we like to do, and when we talk about SQL Server Enterprise and what it brings to the table from a BI perspective, there's a lot of different tools in our stack. And they're all included. Like if your company is out there and they've purchased SQL Enterprise, they have a license for SQL Server Enterprise, you've got your data quality tools, you've got your data integration tools, you've got all of this stuff that's just part and parcel of our BI solution that solves a lot of these problems. So let's talk first a little bit about data warehousing and what some of the changes are. And so, what we're going to talk about today in reference of products, and I promise we'll get into the demo and it will be much more interesting than slides. But what I want to talk about from a SQL Server perspective is some of the changes that we've made that sort of influence and impact our data warehousing capability. And one of the things that we've done is anybody that's familiar with Excel and has used Excel in the last few years with a technology embedded called PowerPivot, is essentially that we've gotten some massive compression capabilities now built into our product. And what we did with Excel was we came up with a technology called PowerPivot, which is actually a columnar compression tool. And we're going to show you PowerPivot, sort of near the end of this presentation when we get into the demo. But what that did is it's this algorithm that takes data, allows you to take data and download it locally to your desktop, and actually using Excel. And I was at a customer a few months ago where we actually took 90 million rows of data, extracted it from a data source, and brought it up inside of Excel. I mean, it was incredible, this technology that allowed us to massively compress this data. And what we've done is we've actually moved that compression technology right into our engine, our SQL Server engine. And so when I talk about the compression now, we call this the column store index. And what this has done is it's allowed us to take the standard index. So if you've got a clustered or non-clustered index on any tables in your data warehouse, before, let's say you would go and create a non-clustered index on a fact or a dimension table, probably a fact table, you're going to take a look at that index size, and it's going to be hundreds of megabytes potentially in size. Now what we do is when we run the column store index, it's actually a version of that compression technology that I talked about that is taking that whole column and compressing it, and all of a sudden the index size goes from 600 or 700 megabytes down to 70 megabytes or even less. And not just that, but the actual speed of query now, where we're seeing thousands of times faster in many instances due to this. And if you look at the number of reads on a column store index versus the number of reads on a non-clustered index, when you do a standard table join, it's a factor of like 1/100th what it would have been. So, there's some important changes that we've made to our code base in SQL Server 2012. You recall I mentioned that we have a lot of data consistency issues throughout government organizations as well. Especially where you've got that, different groups inside the organization that are doing different things, and they've got their own transactional systems. I've spent some time working at a pharmaceuticals company, and one of the things, the takeaways that I had from there, and this is before we had tools like data quality services, but one of the challenges we had there was that there was a list of drug names. And of course, pharmaceuticals, drug names, makes sense. So, we had a set of sales reps that were taking orders for these drugs, and instead of having a standard drop-down list or radio button type list in their ordering system, their fulfillment system, it was basically a standard entry, like just text entry. And so we're running into a lot of problems where there were multiple drug names for the same drug. And how do you get that into, one version of the truth? And we do that now using tools like data quality services and master data services. And these are really what you would call the data dictionaries inside your organization, where they're managed by a set of data stewards who would go out and say, okay, here are the terms that we're going to use for all of these drugs. Here are the terms we're going to use for X, Y, Z. So yeah, these are really sort of some of the important things that we're doing within the tool to try and create that homogeneous view of data throughout an org and a master data warehouse or central data warehouse. And I'm not going to go too much into master data and data quality. We can actually do a full other session on that. I'm working to build a demo right now, so we can take a look through that at some other time. But very, very powerful stuff. So I didn't spend too much time on data warehousing because it's not as much fun as reporting. So we're going to take a look at reporting, and just wanted to take you through sort of our standard platform before we get into the demo, so you understand how all of the tools that we're going to demo are going to work together. When I talk about SharePoint and SQL Server and Microsoft Office, a recent addition to this slide has been the Microsoft Office logo. I used to just have SharePoint and SQL Server together, and this was years old. Back probably 3 or 4 years ago, I started with this slide. Obviously, the product versions have changed too, but what I've done though is I've added the Office logo to the slide now, because really, when we talk about business intelligence, it's no longer just Microsoft SQL Server. We're bringing together technologies like SharePoint that, depending on what versions of the product you have, if you've got SharePoint 2010 and SQL Server 2012, you now have a tool called PowerView. And you don't get that tool unless you've got those two products, right? Now, of course, that all changes when we get into Office 2013. If you have Office 2013, then you've got PowerView that's built into Excel. So we know that this is confusing for customers. We're obviously trying to change it so that it's one single version of the truth. But we're going to take a look at some of the differences today, just so that you're clear on what each one of these tools does and brings to the table in terms of capability. So this is the standard BI platform architecture, and this is what I used to present to my end users, when we were managing all of our SharePoint BI environments. And once again, I've added the Office logo, but this is sort of the standard architecture. And what I like to, when I think about BI, I like to think of the starting point as being SharePoint. And within SharePoint, you have the ability to launch the BI tools that are going to drive your business. And I've got the SharePoint services catalog in the center screen here, and these are the services that actually run as part of SharePoint that are an extension of BI. So you've got tools like reporting services, which is your ad hoc reporting tool. You're going to launch directly from within SharePoint. You're going to store all of your reports inside SharePoint. They're going to be versioned, and permissions are going to be controlled all through SharePoint, all using this one tool. And then, of course, PowerPivot, which I mentioned earlier, which is this incredible compression and now modeling technology that we've built into Excel. PowerPivot can live inside of Excel. It can also live inside of SharePoint. So two important things there. PowerView, which is a really fantastic visualization tool that we now have, that sits on top of data, specifically PowerPivot data, where we can now, from an ad hoc perspective, if we think about reporting services as being more of operational reporting, the PowerView component is more of an ad hoc tool, and we'll take a look at that here in a second. And then, of course, we have the standard Excel, and then Performance Point, which is our last sort of thing on the end here. And I don't tend to talk too much about Performance Point. It's looking a little dated, in my opinion, from a just how just the bars and charts and things. Incredibly important tool if you've got OLAP cubes. If you want to drill in and use decomposition trees and all of those really nice things that are part of that product, still there from a functionality perspective. I just wish that we would hurry up and update it a little bit so it looked a little new age. So with SQL Server 2012, there were a couple of things that changed. And any of you that are running SharePoint in Business Intelligence integrated mode or SSRS integrated mode, this is very important. So architecturally, under the hood, a couple of things really changed. If you've got SharePoint 2010 and SQL Server 2008 R2 currently deployed, you really want to look at SQL Server 2012, or at least the upgrade. And the reason why is that in the 2008 world, you used to have a separate server that would run reports and a separate server that would run SharePoint. And now what they've done is they've taken the SQL Server reporting service and they've actually integrated it into the SharePoint service catalog. And what this means is that you no longer have to have an extra server in your farm to run reporting services. Also, from an administration perspective, much fewer headaches when it comes to setting this up. You're no longer looking at multiple logs to troubleshoot. You've got one central location. All of your Kerberos issues, if you have any, go away because it's all based on your claims infrastructure. So the underlying sort of security components inside SharePoint use a technology called claims-based authentication. And basically, by moving the service into SharePoint from a reporting perspective, we've now made some of the complication around that go away. There's also been some performance improvements in the actual report renders themselves. We're seeing a 2 to 3 I'm sorry, a 2 to 3 times, I guess it says slower, but basically it's 2 to 3 times faster now. Reports are rendering at, and it's faster than in the 2008 R2 SharePoint mode. We're seeing a 30 to 60% performance improvement in report rendering, which is fairly significant when you've got a bunch of reports. And I just wanted to recap what we brought to the table in SQL 2008 R2, because I think that, it is a really good tool. It's a really good product. They've made some great changes in 2012, which is why I always recommend the upgrade. But there were some nice things that came on the scene in 2008, and more specifically, some of the visualization components. There's a gentleman named Stephen Few who wrote a really fantastic book on information dashboard design is the name of the book. I highly recommend that you guys go out and buy this book. It's years old now, but everything in it is just so. He really is he sets the bar for dashboarding and visualization in general. And some of the things that he mentioned in this book were things like spark lines and KPIs and data bars and things like that. And then you'll notice that in 2008 R2, Microsoft actually brought all of those components into our tool set. So you can see here, as part of reporting services, we now have all of these things built into the tool. Another component that we've added in SQL Server 2012 from a reporting perspective is the concept of alerting. Before where we had, reporting services has the ability to create subscription models. So, you can go and create a report and then have that report run at a specific time every day. And that report can then email you, the daily results. Now, what we've done is, they sort of decided that, okay, if you're managing 50 reports, you don't want to be getting 50 emails every day. When should you be getting these reports? And the answer is, when data is sort of falling outside the range that we care about. So what we've done is we've built a rule engine into reporting services now that allows us to set a set of rules and says, if data point A falls out of this particular range, send me an email. But if it doesn't, then don't send me anything. So it's really allowing a little bit more proactiveness in terms of how we're interacting with these reports. Okay, so let's talk about SelfService BI now. So traditionally in the data warehousing world, it's always been a big challenge to get a data warehouse built and have your IT teams work very closely with your end users and vice versa, to have all of these things put in place. And so, one of the ways that we're trying to get around that now is through something called Managed Self-Service BI. And this is a real buzzword, but we're really going to drill into what it means today in the actual Microsoft world. And the biggest thing for us is we wanted to create a set of tools that'll made it easy for the end user to go in and look at their data and then figure out what part of that data that they wanted, and then have the ability to, regardless of what hardware they're running, download that locally on their machines, and then play with it and work with it and build a data model or like a mini data warehouse, if you would, a data mart that allows them to actually ask questions and create some analytics off of that. And then once they're done, take that model and not just keep it, stored on their hard drive, but actually send it to IT and say, what, IT, I've already done all of this. We don't need to write any MDX. We don't need to write any kind of custom code to make this work. It's already built. Can you just go ahead and upload it? And the IT turns around, takes it, and uploads it to their analysis services databases, and it's ready to go. It's queryable from Performance Point. It's queryable from reporting services. It's queryable from all of our tools. And this is really what it's about. And we know that not every person is going to come in and be able to do this stuff, but I'm going to show you how easy it actually is, and it's not intimidating in terms of, if you are somewhat of a power user and you've worked with data and you know how your data works, you're going to be able to figure this stuff out. So as I mentioned, it's all about the end user created and then IT sanctioned. So they'll take a look at it and say, yes, let's publish it. And then they publish it up to the database servers for everybody. So let's talk a little about PowerPivot. And I think we're actually on the next version. Don't quote me, but we may already be on PowerPivot version 3.0. So PowerPivot, if you go to powerpivot.com, if you've got Microsoft Office 2007 or 2010 and you want to run PowerPivot, you can. And it's basically an add-in that you would download from the Microsoft site. So go to powerpivot.com, install PowerPivot. It's free. There's no cost. It's just basically a tab that's going to show up inside of Excel. If you're lucky enough to have Office 2013, which I'm guessing most of you haven't made the change yet, but because it's fairly new. But if you're lucky enough to already have it, it's baked right into the product. And if you go into the tools and the options, and I believe it's like com plugins, you can go ahead and just put a checkbox in PowerPivot, and then all of a sudden it shows up. So PowerPivot is in essence, and I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the chat window here, and somebody wrote Stephen Few, and I wrote yes, that is correct. So if we go into PowerPivot, and what this means, and this has been around for a little while now, but they've really made some incredible changes, to complement SQL Server 2012. And this is the data modeling view. And what we're looking at here on the slide is actually PowerPivot, 2.0 and the data view, or the data model, diagram view is what we're looking at. And what this does is it allows us to actually bring multiple tables together and then allows us to create the joins between them. Anybody that's used Business Objects Universe Designer or a similar tool will recognize this. Now, this is all part of Excel, so you don't need to jump over to a different semantic layer type tool. You can create hierarchies, you can put KPIs in, you can do all kinds of things. And anybody that's familiar with OLAP will know that, hierarchies are all about OLAP, right? So is this sounding familiar? When I talked earlier about how OLAP is going to be going away at some point, or at least the, not maybe the technical components, but how we actually interface and build our models on top of it, that's where this is important. So in addition to PowerPivot, I've talked about a technology called PowerView, and this is the, going back to what I was saying before, this is truly the ad hoc tool that we now have that replaces, well, really we didn't have a tool for this. It was all about Performance Point in Excel. And we did recently, or not recently, but a few years ago, we purchased a company called ProClarity. And I remember when that happened and ProClarity workbooks all of a sudden went away, everybody was really upset because ProClarity was a very ad hoc ready tool. But this is sort of the new ProClarity in the Microsoft world, I guess, where we've got an ad hoc capability. And this is all about, once again, no training for the end user. They just go in, they open the model, and they start dragging things onto the screen, all through a web interface. If you've got Office 2013, this is available, or this technology is available in Excel as well. We'll take a look at this in a second. So the thing about PowerView, I don't know if any of you guys have seen it, or I'm sure a few of you have, but it's really visual. It's a very visual design experience. It flows, it animates, it does all the things that you would want it to do. We've got competitors out there like Tabular who have stunning visualizations. I'm not saying we compete directly with a company that is specifically doing that thing, but I think we bring a lot to the table when it comes to this product, and you're going to see why in just a few minutes. Also, I should mention before we jump off, and I apologize, I'm not really going through each slide because I've talked about this so much, but I don't really need to read each bullet here, but essentially the last thing that I do want to mention is that the nice thing about PowerView is that it's actually presentation ready at all times. And what that means is that you can create your dashboards and you can actually export them into Performance Point, or PowerPoint. And so, where if you've got a big presentation and you want to show your manager, the department results, and you can drill in and slice and dice and filter in real time, all in your PowerPoint presentation. So it's really nice from that perspective. Okay, so we're actually at the end of the slides. I'm going to jump into the demo in just a second, but I did want to mention the SQL and BI resources that we've got, at the end of this, and I'll make sure that all of you get a copy of the slide deck. I'll email everybody who's joined a copy of this, as well as a copy of the presentation recording, which we're currently making as well. So this will take you through sort of the 2012 technologies, that are out there the training that's out there for the 2012 stack, There's a lot of really great resources. Any of you that were on the demo that I did the other day with Always On, we have a whole online virtual lab that you can go in, and actually it will allow you to use our virtual machines to build a cluster, fail it over, do all of those things. So all of these links are in these 2 slides. You see I've got some training as well. Before I get into the demo, any of you have any questions? And feel free to use the chat window if you do. Okay, looks like we're good. Hopefully that means I'm answering all the questions, or you guys have just tuned out. Hopefully not the latter. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just stop presenting, and I'm going to share my next screen. Bear with me. So this is just to give you a background on the actual application. I'm going to share my remote desktop. I have an RDP session just connected to a virtual machine. Okay, if somebody could let me know in the chat window when this shows up and you guys see it, that would be great. I don't want to jump too far ahead. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take an Excel file and essentially connect some data sources together. Thank you, Matt, for letting me know. We're going to connect some data sources together that we're going to build into a PowerPivot model. And what this is going to show is it's going to show the in-memory capability. And granted, I don't have millions and millions of rows. I've got thousands of rows. But from a demo perspective, it's just easier when I'm running, on a couple of gigs of RAM on a virtual machine. We're using Windows Server 2012. We also have SQL Server 2012 and Office 2013. Wherever possible, I'm going to talk about what's available in earlier versions of the product. Now, if you've got Office 2007 or Office 2010, and you've got the PowerPivot tool, the most recent tool installed, this is all available for you, okay? And I'm going to talk about at what point in the demo will that change. So let's take a look at our actual demo data first. And what I did is I went out and I got I downloaded some data from the United Nations site. And it's always a challenge working through these demos when you're trying to come up with a set of data that is sort of standard and and that isn't going to offend anybody, and in general, you can actually create some meaningful analytics off of. And so from a UN data perspective, I pulled down 3 separate tabs, or basically 3 separate measures for the world population. And the first thing that I looked at was across every country in the world, what are the fertility rates? What's the life expectancy? And what are the average populations per capita? And you'll notice I've got some years here in my year dimension. And this is going to allow us to track it over a period of time. So we'll be able to create some nice graphs and charts off of this. So let's just go ahead and close this. And I've got a blank PowerPivot or a blank Excel window open right here. And let me just unpin this so you guys can see what I'm doing. So you'll notice along the top, this is Office 2013, not out of the box, but with a very quick configuration change, you can turn on PowerPivot. And there's some great resources online. In fact, if you go to powerpivot.com, it will give you instructions on how to actually do that. So I can go to the PowerPivot tab, and I just select the Manage, and it's going to load our data model. And this is an actual application that sits in front of Microsoft Excel and that we're going to interface with. So right now we've got a blank canvas, and I need to import some data into PowerPivot. And so I can do that if I come up on my top ribbon here and say Get External Data. I'm going to go to From Other Data Sources, and I can see that we've got several different options. And this isn't just about connecting to Microsoft SQL Server. And I'm sorry, am I sounding okay? I hate to sound like a broken record, but I'm seeing some comments that I'm a little choppy. Am I sounding okay? Is it cleared up? Anybody? Okay, I'm just going to keep moving forward. Okay, great, perfect, thank you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually import some data into my my PowerPivot model. And I'm going to do that using our Excel file that I was showing you before. Now, obviously, we can import more than just from Excel. We can import from SQL Server, from Oracle, Teradata, if you've got access, on any kind of basically data source. If you've even got a text file, a comma-separated text file, that will work as well. So let's import our Excel file. I know that I'm going to use my first row as column headers. Click Browse. So you can see I've tested this earlier today, obviously, so it's already defaulted to the directory where I've got my data stored. So UN data, let's click Open. Okay, so what it's done is it's gone through that spreadsheet and it's taken a look at what we've, basically what the three tabs are. It's taking a look at the data and it's allowing us to then choose the data that we want to import. If we wanted to, we could actually filter this. I could come in using the standard filters in Excel, and I could choose to, let's say bring in, only a specific year range. So we're not forced to bring in the entire data set. If you connect to a SQL Server table, you can actually write T-SQL and import it based on your T-SQL statement as well, with your joins and your where clause and whatever else you've got in there. So let's select Finish. It's going to import all that data for us. Okay. Fantastic. So now I'm going to expand this a little bit, and you can see we've got three tabs. We've got our fertility tab, our life expectancy tab, and our population tab. And what I want to do is I want to bring in some additional data that you can see this is just sort of a flat file in its current state. I actually want to bring in some data that's going to allow us to slice and dice. So get it to a place where we can actually, bring in, different views of the world, not just country, but maybe we want to slice on continent and subcontinent. So to do that, I'm going to import another file. And this file is actually a comma separated or tab separated file from a text file. So I can come down into my wizard and click Next. So I'm going to browse to my UN countries file. I'm trying to go slow here so you guys can see the refresh. I know it's painting probably a little more slowly for you. UN countries. All right, and once again, we've got our first row as column headers. And now let's separate by tab. And now you can see we've got a nice name of country, or a nice set of country codes. We've got area, region, and then country name, all in a single table. Let's click Finish. Okay, so now we've got a fourth tab in our model called UN countries. Now I've got one final thing that I want to do. I don't just want to be able to slice and dice on country name. I actually want to slice and dice on the years as well. And I'm going to do that just using a linked table. So if I jump back over to Excel and then navigate to a file that I've already saved here, which is just basically a time dimension, I'm going to copy and paste this into, oops, there we go. So essentially, we've taken that year list and just pasted it into our column A here. Now what I can do is, using existing data in Excel, so data that I've potentially created on my own, which is in essence what I've done here, I can actually add this back into my data model. And there's a button up at the top in my Excel spreadsheet that says Add to Data Model. So let's do that. It's going to ask us what we want to add and what cell range. We'll click OK. And there you see we brought in now into our model, we have something called Table 1, which I'm going to rename to Year. And now we've got our four tabs. So let's take a look at what this actually looks like in a diagram view now. And here we have it. So I've got essentially each one of these tables was one of the spreadsheets that we imported. And then we've got our UN countries and our year dimensions. And I'm just going to bring this down underneath my UN countries and my year dimension. And I'm going to start making some joins within these tables. So I can drag year over into year and join that. Okay, there we have our year now connected from each one of our fact tables. And now what I'm going to do is take my country name and join that to country name in my UN countries table. So you can see what we're doing here is this is the same as if we were writing a query that said, interjoin on between these tables. So really, really very powerful in what we can do here. So now I've got all of my dimension tables joined to my fact tables. I can start making some changes. And when we talk about OLAP and we talk about analysis services, one of the key features of analysis services is our ability to take what would potentially be a business layer, so very confusing terms from a data perspective, and actually turn them into something more meaningful for the end user. So when the end user goes out and connects to their OLAP cube, they see something that's meaningful to them that they know is they can use in their report. And the nice thing about this tool as well is we have total control over each one of these fields. And so I can go in and rename this to whatever I want. Also, if we wanted, we can create hierarchies. And it's as easy as dragging and dropping each one of these fields into this hierarchy. And I'm not actually going to create the hierarchy, but I just wanted to show you that we could do it. So now that we've got all of our tables, I want to do one more thing, and I'm going to flip back over to our data view. Now we've got some raw numbers that we're pulling in here from a fertility, life expectancy, and population rate. And this is called children per women's, but really it's more about, and probably the less offensive way is to say family sizes. But what I'm going to do is take this auto sum tool here, and I'm actually going to add a measure to this report. So let's just take an average across this. And now we've got our measure. And you can see it's added this column or this field in this column that has average of children per woman. And there's an actual formula that the tool has written itself. So you can write pretty complex formula. I just use the standard out of the box stuff because I'm not a DAX expert, but this is the technology, the language behind this is called DAX. And it's the standard Excel formulas that you can use. So you can do a lot of complex things and create some measures. I want to go through this, and Chris is asking if this will be recorded and accessible again, and yes, it will be. So I will send out the link, Chris, when this is done. All right. So let's go over to life expectancy now, and let's do an average of that, and then let's do population, average, and I apologize, I'm doing this in real time, so I know it's taking a little bit longer, but the point is to show you guys how to do it. And let's actually format our numbers here so they're not decimals. Let's make them whole numbers. Okay, there we have it. All right, so one more look at our diagram view. And now you'll see that we've got some functions that are written in here, this actual, the measures in the formula. And what I'm going to do is I want to hide some of these fields. Obviously, I don't want country name year to show up in every single view that my end user is going to see. So I can just select all of these using the shift key. I can say hide from client tools. So I just want to include the measures. We know that we're going to have year and country in our UN country tables and year tables. Okay, there we have it. So this is our model. This is our completed model. And we won't need country code, so let's hide that too. Now from here, what I can do is I can actually start to create some analytics off of it. And let's just quickly take a look at it in Excel. So let's go to pivot table. It's going to ask us if we want to create a new worksheet, and let's do that. So there we've got our pivot table, and if you look up over on the right-hand side, you'll see that our model is basically represented here. And so let's add just life expectancy, and then let's add some measures. So let's take a look at it. Average life expectancy is 49 if you live in Africa. Wow, it's pretty low. I don't know how new these are. Let's go with country name under that, maybe region. So we can start to make some changes here. Region's probably subcontinent. So we can see, here, and then if we wanted to, we could come in and add some conditional formatting, make this sort of a little bit nicer to look at. Obviously, if you're living in China or Hong Kong, it's a better life expectancy, probably because they eat fewer, greasy meals. I don't know. But anyways, it's essentially, this is giving us a pretty good view already of some of this data. Now, what if we wanted to take this and actually build some visualizations off of it? So, I can absolutely do that. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to save it, and I'm going to save it to SharePoint. And so I've gone to my Save As menu, and I've taken my entire model, and we have a SharePoint 2013 site that we've already created that has something called PowerPivot. And when you configure SQL Server 2012, you install it and deploy it in your environment, you're going to have the ability to, set up PowerPivot, set up Tabular OLAP, and then set up Power View. And this is where the dividing line is. So what I have just done, so the modeling and the using the data inside of Excel is available to anybody that has SQL 2007 2008, 2008 R2, as well as Excel 2007 and Excel 2010. What I'm just about to do, which is saving this up to SharePoint, is sort of that dividing line. You're not going to be able to build what we're about to do next unless you have SQL Server 2012 deployed in SharePoint, reporting services deployed in SharePoint integrated mode. And I'm going to show you a couple of other things, though, that sort of implement or that talk about how this is used in Excel and how this is going to be at least part of your future world, as we move into different iterations of Office in your organization. So I'm just going to name, you can see I've already got a demo file up there. I'm going to name this one United Nations Demo and click Save. This is actually saving this model. You can see down here we've got an uploading to SharePoint. It looks like that's done. So let's minimize our windows. And now let's go into SharePoint. And this is, for any of you that haven't seen it, this is SharePoint 2013. I'm still getting to know it in terms of, thumbing my way around it. Some of the site actions are now included in different locations, under, my settings or the edit menu. So things have changed a little bit, but let's focus on our task at hand here. And that is taking a look at PowerPivot. So let's go. We've got something called a PowerPivot gallery, which is a Silverlight driven view of our data model. And so I've taken that data model now. You can see right here, United Nations demo, and this is the one that I created earlier this morning when I was just testing everything. We've got this really nice view of the different sheets in our workbook and then some of the calculations that we've done. What I can do on top of this model now, our view, you can see our model in the list here, our United Nations demo model that we built. And I'm there's some icons over here on the right-hand side, and these are basically ways that we can interact with the data model that we've just created. So I'm going to select Create Power View Report. And this is going to launch a Silverlight-based application that actually runs right inside my web browser. And if you're running Office 2013, you have the ability to either run this in Office or Excel, or actually within SharePoint. And if you're running SharePoint 2010 and SQL Server 2008, SQL Server 2012, with reporting services in integrated mode, you'll be running this inside SharePoint. So we can see up here on the right-hand side, we've got all of our fields that we'd included in our data model that we just built. And now we can actually start building some visualizations using this model. And just to walk you around the interface a little bit, I've got the standard tabs along the top that include filters and different fields that we can include. There's a lot of different pop-outs here as well, that we can collapse. Obviously, we're thinking about screen real estate issues and some of those types of things for folks. So this is within a web browser environment, and they're trying to make it as compact as possible. So let's start off with maybe we can do, let's take a look at population actually let's start with life expectancy. So if we come over here, we can see there's my life expectancy measure that I had created, and we can add it to our table. It's very easy. We can either drag and drop it, or we can use the menu on the right hand side, and I have very finite control over the size of this. So on top of that, let's go ahead and add also a year so we can start to see some of this data. All right. right, so now we've got our life expectancy and our year, so we can take a look and see some increases in life expectancy over the last 50 years. Obviously, it's much lower in the 1950s compared to where we're at today in the late 2000s. And one of the nice things about this interface is that I can very easily click this, and all of a sudden we can turn this from being more of a tabular view or a data view to actually being a bar chart. So we can grow this even more, and I can take this and let's break it out actually by continent. So if I grab area and we drag it down to our legend field here, we can see now we've got some representations across different continents. So we've got Africa, which is not surprisingly lower, given some of the poverty in that country, and then Europe is actually the best place to live in terms of life expectancy, and I think North America sort of falls in between all of those together. So that's a really easy way to create a visualization using this data set. So let's name this just life expectancies are increasing. So what I can do now is, using my view on the left-hand side, I can actually take this and duplicate it. So we'll come down here and we can duplicate. So from here, what I wanted to show you is some additional visualizations that we offer. So we're not just about single line charts or bar charts on a page. We want to mash these things together and start to build some meaningful representations using different visual analytics. So I'm going to just remove this, and we're still going to work with life expectancy, but we're going to add some additional types of visualizations. And one of the things, if we come up to our styles menu, or I'm sorry, our home menu, and let's add a measure again. So add our average life expectancy. We have a design tablet which opens up, and you see there's a lot of different types of visualizations that we can enter here. So we've got matrices and bar charts, scatter plots. One of the nice things that they've recently added, and this came out in Service Pack 1, for anybody that's running SQL Server 2012 and SharePoint 2010 in integrated mode, this feature was actually added with Service Pack 1. So it's important that you install the Service Pack to get this feature, but we've added a maps component, which is very nice. So in this case, we're obviously talking about different countries in the world. So I'm going to go ahead and actually add a map. So we'll select that. We don't have any data in it yet because we've really only got one measure point, but I'm going to just expand my map here and we can start to build this. So let's take our average life expectancy measure, and once again, let's add region this time to our locations. You can see now it's extrapolating all of our data points, and it's adding these nice bubbles that show the average over the last 50 or 60 years of life expectancy in different countries. And we can see, or different areas, I should say. And these are, region would be representative of subcontinent in this case, I guess. But if we've got, in Africa, much smaller bubbles versus North America and Europe. So, some interesting visuals there to look at. Now let's go ahead and build on this a little bit. So what I want to do is I'm going to click outside of my map. Actually, let's move this up just a bit so we've got more screen real estate. I'm going to add some visualization down at the bottom here. And if I click outside my map design and I go to average life expectancy again, you can see it drops another chart or another data chart in for us. And in this case, I want to take, let's go average life expectancy. Let's add our year as well. And we're actually going to do this at a country name level as well. Now, we've got quite a lot of data here, not really nice to look at. So let's turn it into something more meaningful, and let's use a line chart. Now we've got a lot of different data points. So this is showing us basically every country in the world and what the average mortality rates have been, or life expectancies over the last 50 years. So not very useful in its current state, but let's go ahead and add another visualization that can help us start to change the way that this data is representing itself. So we'll click outside again, and I'm going to add life expectancy and then area. And now let's add a column chart and expand this out a little bit. So now we've got basically the average life expectancy by continent, and then represented up here with these bubbles in subcontinent, and then we've got by country. And what I can start to do is I can actually start filtering this, and all of these components will actually play together on the screen. So if I select Europe, we can see here that some of these visualizations are starting to change. We've got the bubbles that are highlighted in Europe for the subcontinents, and then I've got only the countries in Europe that are represented. And if I can drill in further, so Luxembourg, we can see here, it's going to show us in Europe, okay, yeah, that's about an average country in terms of life expectancy, in terms of, measured against all. We can see only the bubble for that particular area of Europe is highlighted. So it gives us some real ability to drill down into our different charts. If we take a look at all of these together. So I wanted to show you that. So let's take a look at one additional thing that we can do as well. Now you recall I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that we actually have the ability to animate now within some of our analytics. And so let's go ahead and create a new view. And we're actually going to take a look at all three of our measures. So let's take the fertility rates, life expectancy, population, and then let's look at it across area. And then also we'll add our year in here. And we'll turn this into a matrix. Gives us a little bit more view. Now it's really still not a great way to look at this data and visualize this data. And so a nice way to actually visualize multiple data points together is to use something called a scatter plot. And from within our design tools up at the top here, we have our nice scatter plot option. So we're going to select that. And you can see it's given us a bunch of different information all together in different bubbles. Now the size of the bubble is representative of the size of the population for that particular country or for that region. The life expectancy is up on my y-axis here, and my fertility rates is on my x-axis. Now let's make this a little bit more meaningful. And one of the things that we can do, if we take a look at our fields list on the right-hand side here for this particular scatter plot, is we have an option for a play axis. And what I can do is remove this year value and actually move it down to the play axis. And you can see now at the bottom of the screen, it's added an additional x-axis. So we still have our fertility rates, 1 through 7 here. And then along our y-axis, we still have our average life expectancy, and the size of the bubble is still population rates, but we've added an additional x-axis here. And really what this is doing is it's allowing us to take a look at how the world has actually changed at different points in time. And if we were to play this and actually watch it make changes all the way from the beginning, we can really start to extrapolate some decent analysis from this using this. And there's some additional features here that if I select the actual bubbles themselves, we can watch individual outliers across different countries, things like that. So let's go back to our data. We can see Africa here is really not doing well. And so we might want to drill into that, a little bit further. And, we can go, let's say, out of area, let's come and let's add region to our details. And now we can start to see at a more granular level the region. And we want to filter, in this case, let's filter for Africa so we can see Africa specifically. So let's say our region. And actually, let's take Southern Africa and then Eastern Africa and actually compare those two components. We can see here Southern Africa between, I believe it's like 1995 and 2005, average life expectancy really took a dive. So let's drill into that maybe a little bit further. And let me pull up one particular country in particular. Obviously, I've done this before. So let's take a look at Rwanda and just see what happens. You can see there in between sort of the late 90s, early 90s, up until mid 90s in the 2000s, the average life expectancy in Rwanda is really, I think, quite low. And if I don't know if any of you recall, but back in that time period, there was a lot of genocide and things that happened in Rwanda. So this is really representative of our actual data points, and we're really starting to drill into what's going on here, and we can break this out, and compare it to all of the countries together across that particular filter, and we can start to see how each one of these compares with one another. And we can see Rwanda dipping there, and once again, we can compare it to everything else as we move through this data. It's a really pretty incredible way to visualize things, and you got to remember that these visualizations, I built this off of a standard set of Excel data. And then this data could have been imported from SQL Server. This data could have been brought in from any data source that you have, related together, and we've now uploaded this into SharePoint. And this is all running in memory in SharePoint. And this doesn't necessarily have to be thousands of rows. This could be millions of rows, with many more measures and dimension attributes and all of those different types of components that you would have as part of a measurable set of data. Okay, so this really illustrates the point of, we have an end user who has gone out and pulled down the data for themselves, related it together, built a useful model, has taken that model and uploaded it to their SharePoint site, and then shared it, across a large group of people. And so what we can do in addition to this, though, and this is really where the true power of taking Tabular BI and turning it into something more purposeful really comes into play. And I've been talking a lot about how we remove the need to involve IT in some of our development now. And I'm just going to navigate away from this page and go back to SharePoint, PowerPivot Gallery. And actually, we're going to minimize this and launch a new set of tools. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about how that whole end user created, IT managed piece will work. And so we've actually got this data model. What I've done is I've taken it and saved it down to my local desktop here. And you can see this is the United Nations file. It's just a standard XLS file. It's not very big. It's only 500K. I will say that I referenced earlier that we were able to download 90 million records into Excel, and I think it was on a 4 gigabyte laptop or something like that. I believe that the data file ended up being like 90 megs or something along those lines. I mean, it was really incredible, the compression that the PowerPivot did and helped us with in this case. But let me show you quickly now how we're going to take this model and actually send it to the IT team, who will then import it into analysis services for us. So around the time that SQL Server 2012 was launched, Microsoft refactored their tools, basically their BI tools. And you may recall there was a product called Business Intelligence Development Studio. and that has actually turned into SQL Server Data Tools. And SQL Server Data Tools is a separate download. You can actually go out, and if you go into Bing and just type SQL Server Data Tools, it's a free download, and it runs in the Visual Studio shell. It'll use Visual Studio 2012 or 2010. I actually have Visual Studio 2010 installed with SQL Server Data Tools set up. So what I want to do now is I'm going to show you how to take that particular model that we built and import it into Visual Studio, and then we'll do some things and upload it from there. So from Visual Studio, I can go to File, New, Project, and we have a few options now under our business intelligence templates. And one of those options, if you take a look through these, is called Import from PowerPivot. And so let's call this United Nations Demo 1. Name the project and import from PowerPivot, and we'll click OK. So it's going to ask us to find the demo file, which we already have. And this is the one that we had created in our XLS or in Excel. And I'm going to go ahead and import that. So it's going through the process here. It's downloading the model. You can see it's showing up here on the right hand side in our Solution Explorer. And it's going to paint the screen here in a second with basically the same view that we had when we were working with this inside of Excel. So you can see your fertility tab and your life expectancy and all the things, all of our measures are here. Now, SQL Server Data Tools allows us to administer this at a deeper level than Excel would. So you can still create this in Excel, but if we want to start adding permissions to this is really where it would be done inside SQL Server Data Tools. And I'm not going to go through that. That's probably a different session. But I just wanted to mention that there are a few additional things that we can do within this particular view. But the most important thing that we want to do from within Visual Studio is take this model and now publish it to SQL Server. So I'm going to right click and I can just simply deploy from here. And I've already set up all of the underlying connections to our database, which can be administered very easily. And you can see right now we had a successful deployment. And let me just show you where we deployed. So, our deployment server is just localhost, which is Lime, which is the name of my demo environment here. And so it's what it's done is it's taken this tabular OLAP model, which is what this is, and actually deployed it into analysis services for us. So now I can launch SQL Server Management Studio and we can connect. And I just connected to the database instance. So let's go ahead and actually connect to the analysis services instance. Now if we expand our database tree, you can see here we've got United Nations Demo 1. We actually have 2 instances of this. The second instance is actually the live copy of this data model that I currently have open in Visual Studio. When I close that copy, this will actually go away. So this allows me to make changes to it in real time and use that database engine to process those changes. And then when we're finally done, we want to deploy, it would just deploy up to this particular instance. Let me show you what this looks like. So this is a very simple OLAP cube, that we can come in here and we can browse, we can drag our measures out and start adding some additional data. You can see it's all here now inside of our analysis services engine. We didn't have to write any MDX. We didn't have to use any authoring tools. It's all here. So really quite an incredible thing. And you saw how easy it was for me to actually import this. So obviously there's probably going to be a layer of IT, in between you and getting this published. But the point is that you can, start off with some raw data, model it in Excel, create some stunning views and visualizations off this in Power View, either in SharePoint or actually in the Outlook product or the Excel product. And let me just show you that as well before we end here. Let me launch Excel with our model. You can see there's our PowerPivot tab. I believe it's under data. or no, it's insert. And so here you go. So this is Office 2013, and you can see we actually have the Power View icon, which is right here, and it's going to open up our Power View sheet right inside of Excel for us. So really a very flexible option for creating your data models. And you can see all of my tables are represented and my measures are represented. And it's basically the same functionality that we were working with inside of SharePoint. Okay, so let me jump back over to reporting service or to SharePoint, and I want to show you one additional thing. So, we've talked a lot today about collaboration and BI across an organization, and how different groups, especially within those organizations, have their own BI solutions that one group could be running business objects, another group could be running Cognos, and a third group could be using SQL Server and Microsoft's data tool stack. So one of the things that SharePoint really helps us with is some of that cross-pollination across groups. And not only that, but it gives us the tools that we need to author reports without having to actually install additional software. So you don't need to worry about the fact that half your group isn't running the appropriate software. And I've got here just a standard document library, and I've uploaded a reporting services report into that document library. And I want to show you how easy it is to actually launch this guy. So if I right click on our little dots here, and I can go, there's an option to edit this in Report Builder. And this is reflective of having SharePoint running in reporting services integrated mode. All of the standard features and functions that you would traditionally administer through your report manager and your report server, it's all done through SharePoint, with the added benefit of versioning and check in, check out. So it's sort of like having a visual source safe system built right into your collaboration tool. Now in this case, I can launch this and edit in Report Builder, and it is actually going out to my web front end, and it's downloading a copy of Report Builder 3.0 that will run in memory on my machine. And this is the view. I'm not going to execute this report. There's a bit of data behind it, and it's probably not going to come back in a speedy fashion. But I did want to show you one thing, and the thing that I was talking about just a second ago, where we have an environment where people can collaborate across projects. And I've created this report a long time ago now. This is an older reference, but created this report that has these different objects embedded in the report. We've got a table, we've got some data sources on the left-hand side here, obviously our data connection, and then we've actually got some T-SQL, that I've written to pull out this data, some group by, some complex logic as well. Now, what we can do is we can take these components in this report, and I can do something called publish report parts. And if I select this, it's going to ask me what library I want to publish it into, and the library, of course, is SharePoint. So I'm going to select Shared Documents and click OK. And so it's going to ask us if we want to just publish all of these with the default settings or if we want to review them. And so let's review them. Now we can see we've got our chart and our table, our parameter. We also have our data sets right here if we wanted to enable that option. Now we can go in and change the name of this and add some metadata about it. So really very flexible as far as how we would publish this. And I did this earlier today, so I'm not going to go back through it. It's very easy. It takes just a couple seconds. We click the publish button. But let me show you what this does. And if we launch a new report, I've got on the right-hand side here, you can see something called the report part gallery. And if I quickly search through the objects that are in that library, you can see here I've got my chart and my tablets and my parameter all embedded as objects. So it's as easy as dragging this object and dropping it into my report surface. You can see it's already created the data source. It's written the data set T-SQL for me. So it's basically inferred everything that I had included when I had built and designed the original report. So really allows us to sort of define our own view. Imagine if we had a few hundred different report parts in here, and we ran a search and pulled out the 6 or 7 that we wanted. We could build our own custom dashboard with very, very little knowledge around how to develop reporting services reports. So this gets further sort of down the rabbit hole of cross collaboration, where we take a look at a technology like PowerView and PowerPivot inside SharePoint, and giving people in your organization the ability to come in and build their own views of data very easily using an ad hoc tool, and then also leveraging a technology like reporting services, that through SharePoint doesn't require any software installation, and includes some really nice options like the charts that I show, or the report parts, and some of the other features that I've shown you today. Okay, so with that, I'd like to thank everybody for attending this afternoon. And once again, we're going to be running these sessions quite frequently. At minimum, hopefully once a month. I'm going to actually get some additional guest speakers in next week on Thursday, on the 29th, I believe it, or sorry, Wednesday the 29th, I believe it's. We're going to have a big data session, and my colleague Josh Robinson is going to be joining us from our Mid-Atlantic district to present that. So if you have any questions, I will be posting this to YouTube, and you'll have my email address as well. I will send out the the PowerPoint slide deck with all of the links, as well as a link to the training. All right, thanks everybody.